Hello again, beautiful people, and welcome back to Life Treasures and Golden Moments. This is Natalie Silva. Each month, I look forward to being with each of you and sharing stories that I hope will inspire you and make your day brighter. Today, I'd like to share a story about hope. Each of us have had times in our lives when life seems to be tough, and hope sometimes seems so far away that we can't even think about it. But without hope, we struggle to cope with disappointment and defeat, or the uncertainty of the unknown future. So if we realize that even in the most difficult circumstances in our lives, if we have faith and focus our minds on that faith, that we can rise above the tough times and difficulties and find everlasting joy in the miracles that take place in our lives. Today's story is An Answer at the Truck Stop and was authored by Kelsey Tyler. David Hunter received the call just after 9 on a Saturday evening in 1986 while on patrol with the Sheriff's Department in Knox County, Tennessee. A woman was weeping loudly in a corner booth at the Raccoon Valley Truck Stop. Several patrons had grown concerned and contacted the Sheriff's Department. Hunter sighed and turned his patrol car into the direction of the truck stop. As a veteran officer of 8 years, he had seen so much pain in the lives of people that he could only imagine what might cause a woman to weep aloud in a truck stop. As he drove the remaining 3 miles, he remembered how pain was the reason he had joined the police force in the first place. He had ridden along with a police officer one night as part of the research he had to do for a local newspaper story he was writing. The first call of the night involved a woman who had been badly beaten by her husband. Hunter watched as the officer handcuffed the man and led him away. He saw a sigh of relief in the woman's face, and suddenly something clicked. He might write 1,000 stories about good and evil in the course of a lifetime, but none of them could do for that woman what the police officer had just done. No story could rescue her from her pain. Hunter began seeking police work the next day and never once looked back. Now 8 years later, his love of his work was just as strong as it had been in the beginning. Despite the danger and frustration that came with the job, there were always nights like that one in which he could still make a difference for someone in pain. Not sure what he would find, Hunter entered the truck stop cafe and immediately spotted the woman, still weeping, her face covered with her hands. Nearby sat 2 frightened little blonde girls, ages 4 and 5. Hunter's face softened as he approached the children. "What seems to be the matter, girls?" he asked. The older child turned to look at him, and Hunter could see she had tears in her eyes, too. "Daddy left us," she said. "He put our stuff out on the car while he was sick in the bathroom." Hunter's heart sank. He studied the woman and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Then he looked at the girls and smiled a warm, comforting smile. "Well, now is that so?" The children nodded. "In that case, I want you to climb on those stools over there and order something to eat." Reluctantly, the girls walked away from their mother and took separate stools along the counter. Hunter signaled the waitress and asked her to get the girls whatever they wanted from the menu. With the children out of earshot, the officer sat down across from the woman. She looked up from her hands and stared sadly at Hunter, her eyes filled with heartbreak. "What's the problem?" Hunter asked quietly. "Just what my girl said," the woman replied, wiping her eyes. "My husband's not cruel, just at the end of his rope. We're flat broke, and he figured we'd get more help alone than if he stayed. I've been sitting here praying about what to do next, but I don't even have the money for a phone call. I just want to know God is listening. You know." Hunter nodded, his eyes gentle and empathetic. And silently he added his own prayer, asking God to show him a way to help this woman and her little children. He touched the gold St. Michael medallion he always wore around his neck. Although most police officers didn't spend a great deal of time talking about religion, Hunter knew few who did not rely on their faith. Many officers wore the St. Michael medallion under the uniforms because the archangel was recognized as the patron saint of warriors. Hunter believed with all his heart that God had indeed used angels to protect him in the line of duty on more than one occasion. "She needs an angel about now, Lord," he prayed, silently. "Please help her out." Hunter broke the silence between the woman and him. "Do you have a family?" "The nearest is in Chicago." Hunter thought a moment, and then suggested several agencies that could help her. As they spoke, the waitress brought hot dogs and French fries to the children, and the officer stood up and moved toward the counter. He took out his wallet to pay the bill. "The boss has no charge," the waitress said. "We know what's going on here." Hunter smiled at the woman and nodded his thanks. Then he stooped down to ask the girls how they liked their food. As he did, a trucker stood up from his table and approached the waitress. He mumbled something to her, and then she took him by the arm and led him to Hunter. It was unusual for a truck driver to approach Hunter on his own. Typically, truck drivers and police officers have something of a natural animosity for each other. Most truck drivers tend to see the police as cutting into their earnings by writing them tickets, while the police saw truckers as reckless people who placed their potential earnings before safety. The truth, of course, was somewhere in the middle. But still, Hunter couldn't remember a time when he'd been approached by a truck driver outside of the line of duty. The trucker wore jeans, a t-shirt, and a baseball cap. He walked up to the counter and stood alongside Hunter. The officer noticed that the normal buzz of conversation activity had stilled, and the cafe was silent. Most of the patrons, nearly all of them long-distance truckers, were watching the conversation between the trucker and the officer. Excuse me, officer," the man said. "Here." The trucker reached out his hand and gave the officer a fistful of bills. He cleared his throat. We passed the hat. There ought to be enough to get the woman and her girls started on their way." Back when he was a boy, Hunter had learned that cops don't cry, at least not in public. So he stood there, speechless, until the lump in his throat disappeared and he was able to speak. Then Hunter shook the man's hand firmly. "I'm sure she'll appreciate it," he said, his voice gruff from covering up his emotion. "Can I tell her your name?" The trucker raised his hands and backed away from the officer. "Nope. Just tell her it was from the folks with families of their own." Hunter nodded and thought of the fiercely loyal way in which people in Tennessee look out for each other. When the trucker walked away, Hunter counted the money and was again amazed. A small room of truck drivers had, in a matter of minutes, raised $200, enough money for 3 bus tickets to Chicago and food along the way. The officer walked back to the booth and handed the money to the woman, at which point she began to sob again. "He heard," she whispered through her tears. "Ma'am?" Hunter looked confused, wondering who the woman was talking about. "Don't you see?" she said. "I came here completely desperate, hopeless, and I sat in this booth and asked God to help us, to give us a sign that He still loved us and cared for us." Hunter felt chills along his arms and remembered his own prayer, how he had asked God to send help and provide this woman with an angelic assistance. The truck drivers certainly didn't look like a textbook group of angels, but God had used them all the same. "You know, ma'am, I think you're right. I think He really did hear." At that instant, a young couple entered the truck stop, saw the sobbing woman, and approached her without hesitating. They introduced themselves and asked if they could help in any way. "Well," the woman said. "I could use a ride to the bus stop. See, I've got the money now, and I need to get to—" Hunter stood up and walked discreetly away from the scene to a quiet corner of the truck stop where he radioed dispatch. "The situation's resolved," he said. Then he walked toward his patrol car and climbed inside. When he was safely out of sight, he let the tears come. Tears that assured him he would never forget what happened that night in the truck stop. As a patrol officer, he had almost always seen the worst in people around him. But that night, he had been reminded that kindness and love do exist among men, and Hunter had learned something else. Sometimes God answers prayer by using nothing more than a dozen big-hearted truckers sharing coffee at a truck stop in East Tennessee and playing the part of angels. This is Natalie Silva. I hope you enjoyed our story today, and may you remember in those tough times that there is always hope, the hope that is our everlasting joy and comes from God. Until next time, take care, God bless, and have a beautiful week.